Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Forward Resilience, the EU and NATO Neighborhood Fighting Malign Foreign Influences panel. We are live with our partners from Eurocreative in Paris, and I would like to introduce first of all the distinguished moderator for this panel on the Bucharest side of the panel, Mr. Flavius Cabamaria, who is the president of the Romanian think tank Middle East Political and Economic Institute. And okay, so if our French partners can hear us now, we will start the event. Mr. Flavius Cabamaria, please, you have the word. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Welcome you again to our forum. We are a little bit behind the schedule, but we are trying to stick to our program as you receive it. Today we have an outstanding lineup of speakers from Romanian side, 5 speakers. I will introduce one by one. First speakers from Romanian side is Major General Paul Hurmuz. He is very well known. Paul Hurmuz's military career started in 1983. After that, he was appointed in a defense diplomacy position in Ankara, Turkey, and London. Before joining the Brussels NATO headquarters in September 2013, he serves as a head of planned policy and international cooperation in the Romanian Military Intelligence Directorate. Paul Hurmuz assumed the deputy director position of the intelligence division in the NATO International Military Staff at a critical time for the alliance, facing great challenges from both the eastern and southern flanks. On 2nd September 2016, he was appointed as deputy of the State Secretary and Chief of Defense Policy and Planning Department of the Romanian Ministry of National Defense. He retired in August 2017, but he currently serves as a senior associate expert at the Romanian think tank New Strategy Center. Our second speaker, that exactly as is written in the program, is from our side, Angela Grămadă. She is a PhD in International Relations at the National University of Political Study and Public Administration. She is an expert specializing in research and analysis concerning the ex-Soviet space and especially the study of relations between Russia Federation and the member states of the Eastern Partnership. She has also authored various projects focused on the domestic and foreign policy processes in Ukraine. Angela Grămadă is the president of co-founder of the Expert and Security of Global Affairs Association, which is a Romanian think tank designed as an online platform that brings together researchers, expert analysis, journalists, and civil society representatives from Romania and from abroad. Our third speaker will be Olga Zaharova, even though she is not from Romania. Olga is the founder, strategic director, and head of analysis and advocacy unit, Freedom Files Foundation. She is a human rights expert and policy analyst with more than 25 years of experience in research, advocacy, and communication. Olga is a founder and director of Freedom Files Analytical and Advocacy NGO based in Warsaw, Poland. Olga has been actively involved in advocacy at the UN, the Council of Europe, and the EU, international financial institutions, and governments of democracy states. She is also an author of research reports on the functioning of autocracy, corruption, export, and hybrid threats, as policy paper on human rights, democracy, and the work of international organizations. Moreover, Olga is a co-founder and strategic director of International Strategic Action Network for Security, has ultimate goal to counter Russian influence in the region from the Baltic to Black Sea. Next speaker, Professor Miruna Bunaru Troncotă. She's a professor and director of the Center of European Study at the National University of Political Science and Public Administration in Bucharest. Her main field of expertise is foreign policy, EU integration, Black Sea politics, and the post-conflict reconstruction of the Western Balkans, and she published numerous academic articles and policy papers in this field. She is a part of relevant professional networks such as European Fund of the Balkans Alumni Network, Future Lab Europe, Bosch Alumni Network, and Balkans Beyond Borders Ambassadors Network. In her early career, Miruna worked as an intern political officer for the Romanian embassy in Sarajevo and the delegation of the European Union in Pristina. Our last but not the least speaker is coming from Poland, Konrad Pawlowski. He is a professor at the Marie Curie Sklodowska University in Lublin, Poland, Faculty of Political Science and Journalism, Institute of International Relations, Department of International Political Relations, Head of Balkans Department at the Institute of Central Europe in Lublin, Poland. His research field includes Central and Eastern Europe studies, peace and conflict studies, and international law. Member of the editorial board of the yearbook of the Institute of East Central Europe. The lead editor of the Balkan study. Now, this was a very short presentation of our speakers. For more details about their own biography, we can find out on the websites. Each speaker will have for their own presentation, not more than 7 minutes. We'll try to stick on this time. Now we are pass the floor to our colleague from Paris.
Thank you very much, Flavius. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for your patience. Sorry for the logistical, technical details. We are very happy to be here in this beautiful embassy of Romania to France, in this beautiful room, and we are also very happy to be in live and discussing with our Romanian counterparts, colleagues, friends, partners, especially in the National Parliament in Bucharest. Thank you for your presence, your interest in this topic. I will briefly introduce the speakers, and then we will go to the first keynote speaker. Just briefly, on my right, we have Giuliano Setti, who is an advisor for digital, cyber, and technological affairs at CAPS, the Centre d'Analyse, de Prévision et de Stratégie at the Ministry of European and Foreign Affairs. Welcome. Further to the right is Christine Dugan-Clément, PhD, researcher at the Risk Share in EARF2024, and on Artificial Intelligence Observatory at Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne. Welcome. Further again to the right is Pierre Roche, Associate Professor of European and International Politics at Université Catholique de Lille. And on my left, Tefta Kelmendi, you are Deputy Director of the Wider Europe program here at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome. And finally, we hope that our National Railway will allow us to have our last speaker, Alexandre Negrus, who is the President of the Institut d'études géopolitiques appliquées. So we will enter the discussion just briefly, but first we have the great honor to have Monsieur the Senator Olivier Cadic. You are the Vice President of the Foreign Affairs, Defense, and National and Armed Force Committee, and we are very welcome to have you. We are very grateful for your presence and for your time. Please.
Madame la conseillère des Français et étrangers, dear colleagues in Bucharest, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for the organizing of the invitation. First of all, there is no term to destroy a line. Large-scale information manipulation campaigns constitute the new hybrid form of foreign interference. This is a challenge for democracies in the information and reputation war waged by certain authoritarian regimes. Information manipulation campaigns are not new. There is a Russian signature when it comes to disinformation that includes the spread of rumors and fake news. The revisionist strategy dates from the Soviet era. The Soviets became famous by attributing to the Navy the execution of Polish officers at Katyn, or the assassination of JFK by the CIA. In 2016, living in EU, UK, I observed the wave of disinformation during the Brexit campaign. This intensified with the 2016 US presidential election. Also, in preparation for the French military programming law in 2018, I went to the Pentagon. Their hybrid warfare doctrine inspired me to integrate the fight against fake news into the military program law in 2019. But if we have a Russian storm, climate change in China. China is the leader of the countries engaged in the challenge to the international order directed against Western countries. In 2020, China tried to hide its mistakes in handling COVID. The Chinese Communist Party has promoted China's model of widespread surveillance and denigrated democracies. A press release from the Chinese embassy in France indicated, for example, that retirement home staff have deserted and led the residents to die of hunger and disease. The ambassador has been summoned, but the press release has not been withdrawn from the website of the Chinese embassy. As a consequence, in April 2020, I called for the creation of a Cyber Rapid Reaction Force in a report titled Disinformation, Cyber Attacks, and Cyber Malice, the Older COVID War. 16 months later, in July 21, France created the Vigilant Agency. Over the past 3 years, Vigilant has unveiled several large-scale Russian operations. France no longer hesitates to use name and shame. We knew that the Paris 24 Olympic Games would be the subject of information attacks. The description of the decadence of European morality of the Russian arsenal. The controversy over Christ's Last Supper during the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Paris took up elements of controversy following the fire of Notre Dame. China did not let out. The night following the opening ceremony, 3 districts of Paris experienced a 10 minutes power outage. The information was picked up by Chinese media. More than 4 million TikTok accounts relayed the information, some announcing that only the Sacré-Cœur Basilica remained illuminated. Digital campaigns to manipulate information have become a real instrument for destabilizing democracy. We seek to better prepare individuals and societies. Vigilant has prepared a guide for businesses for the applicants available in French and English. Vigilant demonstrates that we can move in this direction in order to anticipate disinformation attacks. Chinese Communist Party, Russia, are no longer a threat of us. They see democracies are weak, predictable systems. We are to surprise them. An international cyber deterrent force must be created to destroy China's cyber war on command. We need to understand that no democratic country, not even the United States, has the critical size to compete alone against the threats posed by China today. Faced with a hyper-centralized China, democracy appears divided. The fragility of our edifice is from the fragmentation of states and the separation between public and private players. The EU has taken great steps forward unity by creating a Europe of cyber sovereignty. Even united in this issue, the EU will not have the political size. The United States advocates cyber solidarity, and rightly so. On the internet, Google is more powerful than Russia. Amazon Web Service proved its ability to make Ukraine resilient at the start of the Russian invasion. EU collaboration, US, public-private, must be able to take place in the same way as we do in the nuclear sector, starting, for example, by transparently sharing our mutual vulnerabilities. There is no system without vulnerabilities. Taiwan is the laboratory of the Chinese disinformation attacks. To optimize our action, we need to invite Taiwan to join the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn and the NATO Strategic Communication Center of Excellence in Riga. There are ways to destroy China's cyber war on the inside and free the Chinese from this 2.0 dictatorship. Chinese Communist Party proudly announced their long-term plan to rule the world by 2049 with a system without freedom. Democracy has also a long-term plan. It's to prevent the Chinese Communist Party from achieving that plan. And
Thank you very much for the speech that was presented by French colleagues. Now we are going to start the first part of our event. The first subject is about general topic. And we have here our first speaker, Major General Power Hormuz. He is going to talk about resilience in the age of cognitive warfare. Are you ready for the challenge? General, please, you have the floor. 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. The strategic context is increasingly complex, dynamic, and competitive. Our rivals engage in a continuous struggle involving all the instruments of statecraft. These attacks won our way of life from assertive authoritarian rivals and extremist ideologies are difficult to defeat without undermining the very freedoms we want to protect. Their way of warfare is strategic, synchronized, and systematic. So we need to remember Sun Tzu observation that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. In the age of emerging and disruptive technology, this is the core of the matter, because control of digital technology allows our rivals to take over our way of life. The concept for a sixth domain of operation emerged at the beginning of 2020. It was introduced in the essay Weaponization of Neurosciences as part of the Warfighting 2040 study run by NATO ACT. Here is the conceptual relationship between the cognitive warfare and other types of warfare, according to Professor Zhu Qianhong and Zhu Weihang. According to psychologist Dr. Yvonne Masakowski, our adversary viewed technological superiority as means of achieving global supremacy across the economic, military, and geopolitical landscape. She is the co-chair of the NATO Human Factors and Medicine Exploratory Team 356 and has been for more than 25 years with the US Naval War College. Here are the cognitive warfare first order effects. Trust being the main target. And the second and third order effects, shaping of nations, relationships, societies, and individuals. So in order to counter our adversary cognitive warfare, we need to make cognitive security an integral part of our national security. We need to build our technological resilience, design our AI and machine learning networks, systems, and technology with resilience. Here are some conclusions from Professor Masakowski. The Human Factors and Medicine Exploratory Team 356 performed an assessment of the science and technology required to mitigate and defend against cognitive warfare, so that NATO will have the capability to acquire and preserve decision and cognitive superiority over their adversaries and across the conflict spectrum. The proposed science and technology roadmap is based on a house model developed by the Exploratory Team 356 and is linked to the operational observe, orient, decide, and act decision cycle. Imagine technology and cognitive warfare. Cognitive warfare impacts all domains and dimensions of military operations. Technology is one main enabler and force multiplier in both offensive and defensive cognitive warfare. The effects of cognitive warfare will impact trust at every level of command and control and present challenges in decision-making. Future designs of technological systems and networks will alter the role of the human in the observe, orient, decide, and act decision cycle. AI and machine learning adaptive robots will be designed with human-like cognitive processing. And in the question and answer session, I'm ready to come with more details on this topic.
Thank you very much, Major General, for this presentation. We will still remain on the presentation side and also try to set the scene of this discussion. And what we would like to talk is
I would like to finish my presentation if it's okay with you.
Sorry, I thought that you were done.
No, I just wanted to mention that I have more things which I can answer later because I want to make the 7 minutes if possible.
My bad. Sorry.
No problem at all. It's good that we can understand each other. The requirements for AI is all the more pressing when considering the need to counter AI-enabled threats to our national security. Malicious actors will undoubtedly seek to use AI to attack, and it's likely that the most capable hostile state actors are developing or have developed offensive AI-enabled capabilities. The European Union Institute for Security Studies published in August this year the study Hacking Minds and Machine, Foreign Interference in the Digital Era. It explores the interplay between information manipulation and disruptive cyber operation, revealing their role as complementary components with the broader strategy. The study concludes by identifying convergences across the cases studied and highlights foreign interference as a critical and growing threat to global security. It offers targeted recommendations on how the EU can significantly bolster its defenses and resilience against this threat. Before concluding, some thoughts from Mr. Kieran Martin, who was for 7 years the CEO of National Cybersecurity Center within the GCHQ, the British NSA. First, we should not treat disinformation as a standalone problem, but more as a potential foreign interference in democracy, democratic process, and general media discourse. Second, there is a tendency sometimes to confuse intent and activity with impact. We have to be wary of exaggerating the impact of this, because if you tell people often enough and loudly enough that there are all sorts of nefarious interferences with democracy and political discourse, they will start to believe you with all the consequences that involves. Third, it's unwise to talk about the aggressive use of technology, which in fact is neutral, is neither good nor bad. Be careful of incidents because of a defective IT system. Don't jump to the conclusions. The digital system went down around the elections. It must have been the Russians. If you let that truth in the face of overwhelming technical evidence, you are inviting people to lose trust in the electoral system. Fourth, deterrence. We have struggled in tech deterrence, partially because of the geographic imbalance. When you do not have to send somebody over to inflict harm on a country, it changes the calculation, particularly with regards to Russia, for two reasons. One, the Russian state do not extradite its people. The second, it's unembarrassable. At the same time, there are offensive cyber capabilities, and the degradation of the digital infrastructure of disinformation outfits in adversarial territories such as Russia could be a good use of those. Of course, it will remain a national responsibility. And we need to stress the fact that it's very hard to divide societies or countries that do not want to be divided. And this is a conclusion. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear General Hormuz. We are staying exactly on our time. We appreciate your concise presentation on the cognitive warfare issue that will be explored also during our session of Q&A. Now I will pass the floor to our colleague from Paris. Romain, you have
Thank you very much, General, for this presentation on cognitive security as part of national security. And this is true that it's something very important, something that was discussed a few years ago already in Central Eastern Europe, but probably a bit less in France. And it has been a topic over the past few months, over the past few years, with certain politicians that took the topic very seriously, like Mr. Kadik, also with media talking about this, and generally the public opinion being a bit more concerned about this problem. And I would like to speak with Julien and to ask Julien, how do we see it, and to talk more about what are exactly malign and foreign influences, how we see it from Western Europe, let's say, in France, how it is tackled, what are the tools, what are our answers, please.
So I had 3 hours.
3 hours and a half.
So thank you so much to invite me and to talk about these fascinating topics. I will remain quite short because there are many things to stress and to highlight. So I will keep sort of bullet points. First of all, the expression you choose, the foreign malign or malicious influences, is something about which the French Senate worked about a few months ago, because there was an investigative committee which took form and worked about a report on these precise foreign malicious influences, especially in all the digital realm, I would say. And when we talk about the terminology about these topics, for the past the past speakers, different expressions have been used: information, community security, community warfare, propaganda, and certain information manipulation. And this is a choice which is important actually to make. And at times it appears that the debate in France and in Europe, for example, and these have an influence as well to the political sphere. This might at times contribute to confusing a bit the mindset and the perception of the public about this precise topic, because we at times don't mean exactly the same things when we talk about propaganda and information manipulation, international influence, and as such, cognitive security and warfare. So, well, I'm not going to delve too much into these topics, but I think this is quite an important point to make, all the more so as for the past year and a half, with the shifting French official position on naming and shaming about this kind of threats, people have been talking much more about interference, which I would not say it's totally new, but in the I would say in the strategic mindset and in the official discourse in Paris, this is something to be highlighted. I think, although we should not be confused too much once again here between what results to interference and what is about influence, because for obvious reasons, you might all get that influence at times is something which is benign, which is not malicious per se. Well, anyway, I'm just putting it apart, but the institution I'm working for, the CAPS, the policy planning staff with the MFA, a few years ago, sorry, already 6 years ago, worked on a report which was called information manipulation, and this was. But this took shape after many and long debates about which kind of threats and topics we were talking about. And this precise expression, information manipulation, is sought to reflect more precisely the clandestine nature of the threats, because you and me are not supposed to be aware of the manipulation we are subject to. And about the malicious intent, so the intent to harm yourself, a society, a political party, or whatever. So, well, this is something also I wanted to emphasize. Another point to make, I think it's about the multifaceted nature of the topic we are talking about, because actually a myriad of problems should be addressed in a combined way, ideally speaking. This is about the strategies of state actors here. It's about Russia, it's about China, but not only, as we all know. It's about trust in the media. It's about the content moderation on the major internet platforms. And this is not a minor issue. This is about the infrastructure of all the internet as we know it today, and there is a major trend today about the infrastructural turn towards information manipulation, because the malicious actors are thinking also to shape this infrastructure, to take some kind of control over them, and in particular domain names. And here I'm referring to all the loose Russian state influence apparatus, but this is a specific topic, I guess, and very technical in nature. And this is also about sanctions policy, because, well, there are some intertwining between all these matters. I'm not going to delve into the purpose, the intent by the main actors in this realm, because this is something which has already been stressed. Just one point, perhaps a bit quickly, about a few trends, because what we have been noticing, especially here seen from Paris, is that some threat actors do not have any behavioral limits. I would say no limits, no breaks in their own will to constrain and to coerce in this informational realm. One example among many others, the instrumentalization of some state visuals, I would say here. Last year, for example, there was a story which has been spread in some media and through social networks about the French plan, so-called plan to share France's nuclear deterrence with all the EU member states. And the state actors which spread this kind of news are perfectly aware, actually, of the confusion of this type of misinformation. They are directly contributing to create, and this is something which is being, I would say, seized by some political parties, and which are also building their own rhetoric and strategy on these couple of stories. So the risk here is very complex to tackle, of course, as you guess, especially in the current context. Another topic to mention is the timing issue. I would say the temporality, because we are also used to think in a very short term, period of time. We are thinking to react quite immediately to all these informational influence threats and so on. But information manipulation happen on the very long run. They are also happening a lot during sensitive moments like elections, like polls, like street demonstrations and so on. But if you don't take into account this I would say, very long run period of time, analyzing the adaptation of the main threat actors, the way they are seeking to bypass EU sanctions or whatever, you will have the full picture, and it will be difficult to act in a more precise and policy-oriented way. I would have many of these things to stress, but I guess my time is out. So
you can continue
so for just one minute here. There is another aspect perhaps to stress, which is the perfect combination between the foreign policy and domestic policy nature of these threats. Meaning here that all the talks or the debates we legitimately put on the table about these threats at times might have some negative consequences. I explain myself here. By raising the awareness of the population of ourselves here in this room and whatever, we are spreading some anxious, some negative things actually in the air. It's always perturbating to talk about this manipulation of information, because this relates to the trust we have towards the state institutions, to democracy itself, and so on. And by saying that, I mean that some very interesting works, especially taking into account the US context, so some works made by US political scientists and international relations think tankers, have been studying all that have been happening in the US context, meaning that all the debate they had about these threats for the past 8 years, after the 2016 election, have not dramatically contributed to improve actually the state of the debate and the policy responses here in this realm. And by creating this sort of confusion, this led the private sector having a full room of maneuver in this realm. Not to say that this is bad in itself, but there is also some kind of important industrial stakes around the creation of a fighting against disinformation industry, which is already taking shape in the US in particular, and this is a trend which is being exported now in Europe. But I'm not saying this is bad, but we have to take into account when policymakers are trying to enact the legislation and to impose a democratic debate about these topics. So I will perhaps stop here. Thank you so much.
No, thanks a lot. And I think that we will try also to put a bit of interactivity, because this is why we've fought with the sound system for so long. And maybe here a follow-up question for the panel in Bucharest would be exactly about this, about the domestic context and how it is influencing basically the public moods, the debates in the society. And we know that Romania in 2024 has been experiencing a series of elections, is going towards the parliamentary election and the presidential election in a few weeks. So how is it going in Romania at the moment? Is it a topic? Do we talk a lot today in the society during the political campaign about this threat, about manipulations or not?
Our speaker will try to answer to this question, and after that I have also a question from our panelists. That's the question. If you can also repeat, otherwise I can make a very short summary. How is it present in the public debate in Romania, this kind of malign influence and this perspective?
I think we had a lot of conversation. I will not go into details, but we had a lot of conversation and a lot of, I might say, even tensions because of so many elections which we had and we are going to have in Romania. I still believe that there is a a lot of space for improvement. I don't believe we have, any of us, the right answers. I will only mention two examples from the past, which are giving us a good understanding. For example, the incidents in 2017 for President Macron campaign, when the Russians were releasing a lot of embarrassing information, but because of the law in France, which is not allowing for the media to publish anything 24 hours before the elections, practically that Russian exercise was useless. At the same time, because of the different law and regulation in Slovakia, the impact from the Russian, you can call it information operation, malign influence, whatever, cognitive warfare, the impact was higher. So I believe that if we want to find a way to deal with this kind of malign influence, cognitive warfare, hybrid warfare, call it as you want, we need to have a better understanding between the political parties, especially when we are dealing with fake news, fake images, fake audio, and also a good understanding with the media, the traditional media, but also the new outlets, not to promote and not to amplify this kind of attacks, because as I mentioned in my latest part of my presentation, impact is sometimes amplified unintentionally. There are unintended consequences of our reaction. So we have to be very careful. We have to try to find our solutions. One solution, for example, in the United States, it was that rumor control, trying to control and counter all the rumors, especially during the elections, but it depends on every country's system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Hormuz. I would like also to say something and to add related to what our colleague from France already presented. We are very also interested that if you can present us certain very clear, concrete measure that from Western side or France put into practice in order to relate to deterrence, countermeasures to these malign influences. This is one thing. And the other things that already was mentioned during our panel was many of the world's militaries have acknowledged the growing importance of the information space, although their strategy have different names, as we speak here about cognitive warfare. What are, my question also is, what are real wars and how is victory defined in modern war dominated by artificial intelligence and also on this environment with malign influence?
Thank you for these questions, because I think of course they are key here. On your first one, about about some examples which would illustrate the countermeasures France in particular has been seeking to implement. Well, here I would have a twofold answer. The first one is a domestic framed, context, and the other one, which is perhaps more pertinent here, the EU. Actually, the way that the French position stands relates more and more to a EU framework of answer, and I think this is perhaps something which is very interesting to as well here to stress, because all what's happening with the EU External Action Service, all what relates as well to the Weimar framework with Poland and Germany, in particular, and in France in this realm, all this contributes to the raising awareness about these topics and threats, about the measures which could be taken. and that does not prevent every nation state and every EU member state to implement its own laws. But as far as France is concerned, I'm not personally legitimate to talk about domestic politics because it's not my, I would say my mandate here. But I would personally observe that law itself is not sufficient. Once again, and we could not be satisfied with only top-down measures. That the very long-term, once again here, responses from the bottom here. So meaning that all the education system and so on is absolutely key in this regard. And some very interesting measures have been also taken in high schools, in universities, and so on, so as to create some specific curricula and diplomas in relation to this topic. So this is only the beginning. This is a very long-term topic. Once again, here I repeat myself, but well, this is I think one example. And your second questions, I didn't understand too well the whole questions because the sound was not great here. You were referring to military strategies in particular, but I did not catch the whole question.
Yep, I can repeat also the second question. Also, maybe General Hormuz will contribute a little bit on this question. What are real wars, and how is victory defined in the modern warfare dominated by artificial intelligence? Also taking into consideration what you already presented.
Okay. Thank you. I see. This was about AI. Which in this case should not be taken as a new buzzword because there are very concrete things happening around all this influence landscape. I would say for a few years, all the debates in this regard were turning around deepfake videos, as we all know. There were not any major incidents related toward a deepfake video having a strategic effect, as we know here also. But I would perhaps stress in my answer the potential very corrosive impact of fake audio contents, which are now proliferating in many respects, not only in high-intensity conflicts like in Ukraine or in other regions of the globe, but this is a threat we are not perhaps able now to counter efficiently. So I would personally stress this particular issue, and so as to fake pictures and images and so on. Here the technology is not totally yet mature, so as to be fully duped by this content. So hopefully we have still room for maneuver, but there is a time, of course, when the technology itself, when innovation does not run behind the law, but when innovation is just taking the lead. So we have to be careful about it in this regard.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that still work in progress in this regard, and I think that if we go back to what you said in your first two interventions, it's really much about a multifaceted phenomenon in which you have to answer from multifaceted approach and tools and strategies. And this is also very important for us to understand better how we face it from different countries, as we need to have a unified approach, knowing also that we have different experiences, because we have different interests in different regions, and we need also to have the specialization in the EU between Europeans. And this is why the second part of this panel discussion, we would like to focus more into case studies. And the first case studies that we will go on with Christine is about Eastern Europe. It's about Ukraine, the lessons learned from this country and the war that is going on at the moment for 10 years, of course, but the very hot part of the war is there for almost 3 years. It's very much in the news right now, also because of external factors, the US election. So it's something full of disinformation. It's something full of manipulation. And we would like to know how you see it from Eastern Europe.
First, thank you for inviting me and giving me some time in order to deliver this huge topic. Like my colleague, please in advance forgive me if I am a bit quick and a bit short on some topics because there is a lot of things to do and to say. But before discussing about specifically for me, like foreign information manipulation and interference in Central Europe, just let me propose you a brief overview on the Russian intelligence services reorganization. And I think it is definitely very important because we are facing a wave of disinformation at no. We are in reaction, but we have to observe what is going on because it is a kind of hint on what is going to happen in the next future and maybe in a very next future. So let's say that following the initial month of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and just because they realized the underperformance, and especially of Russian intelligence services, the Kremlin initiated a kind of massive reorganization of some services, including the GRU, so military intelligence services. Several changes have been made, but don't be afraid, I don't say everything and I don't give you all the list. But let me just focus on some, in my opinion, key areas, namely governance, organization, recruitment, and collaboration. When we are talking about governance, the Russian presidential administration established a commission to create influence. At the very beginning, it was overseen by Sergei Kiriyenko. And this committee was tasked with evaluating the effectiveness of the operation, and they were assigning specific duties to the secret services against targeting nations, including Central Europe, Western countries, and even African countries and Middle East countries, depending on who you are talking about. So we have the change into the governance in order to be more efficient, more, and I will jump on the word of the General Major, being strategic, synchronized, and systematic. If we are talking about the organization, just digging in, Averyanov, who is the deputy head of the GRU, created special activity services composed of different entities. And in these entities, you can find the Unite 29155, which is also known as the Guard Unites. And they are responsible for the agents who are working with partial cover. You've got a new formed Unite, sorry for my English and my French accent. Let's say that it's strong. So this Unite like 54 and 654, which is composed of the agent with full cover, we are enabling this cover help them to operate in targeted countries for extended periods. And there is an headquarters that is planning department in charge of organization these special activities. So we are focusing on the way of being more efficient. If we are going on recruitment, and this is also a topic of great interest for us in order to make like perspective on what is going to happen, on what is the next future. Recruitment efforts have shifted toward non-military profile for a lot of them. And it offers two main advantages, in my opinion. First, new recruits can be fully trained in order to meet the needs of the unites that I just talked about. And on the other hand, because they have no military past, military file, military background, they are like clear skins. So it's much more difficult in order to know who they are when they are going to be deployed. This is something which is definitely interesting. And this kind of recruitments includes both Russian people, of course, but also foreign students. And you can see an increase of the efforts that have been put in on the African countries, but also in Central Europe countries, and even in South American countries, meaning that these clear skins are native speakers. And they are also familiar with the cultural and the historical context of the operational environment, which is very important when you want to craft narratives, specially designed in order to be seductive for the populations that you want to target. And it could help Russian services to avoid some mistakes that have been done in the past. And I am thinking like in 2014 and 15, when they make like huge mistake, when they push some profile who were like the return of white Russian in Eastern Ukraine. And it was a mistake because it didn't fit with the aspiration of population. So they could avoid this kind of mistake. And talking about collaboration, of course, there is a long history about connection between state services and organized crime. That is not something which is new. But since February 2022, the collaboration with the organized crime has increased and has deeply increased. And these groups, like mafias or whatever the specific terms that you are using for this kind of cartels, offers multiple advantages, including their local connections and their geographical spread. They provide intelligence services of the environmental context. They can have valuable contextual knowledge. This is no sci-fi, far from this. Maybe some of you remember of the connection and the link between Russian services and the Ukrainian drug cartel, Krimprom, that have been increased and found by the SBU. So this is something that is already happening. And because these groups are accustomed to violence and can be used in order to perpetrate a new generation fog of war, because it's, the possible deny. It's not me, it's just criminal group. So it's not on my interest. And this new organization has been tested on the ground, and particularly in Moldova, which has been heavily targeted since mid-2022 in order to just check the thing. So let me go back on tactics, and if there is something specific when we are talking about targeting Europe, and just let me know when time is definitely running out and slipping out. Okay, so just make me almost like you're out of time, something like that. Okay, so whether Russian tactics are specific in this region or simply involve well-adapted strategies remain to be seen, in my opinion, because they are very volatile and very diverse in the way that they are dealing. Indeed, we observe a capitalization on kind of specific narratives, but they are not created from scratch. They are crafted to align with pre-existing grievance or underlying distrust. And on that point, Russia can leverage various triggers. On one, they can rely on ethnic minorities and attempt to divide population. And that is something which is not new. Baltic countries had experienced it since 2007. So it is let's say, a good old story, but it is still working. So they are still working on that. This division can lead to a multiplication of crises, and this is very important because the more crises you have to manage, the more decision making is going to be quite complicated. If you just have one crisis, that's complicated. Two crises, that's very complicated. Three crises, it's not a sport for everyone in the room. And we are observing that they are jumping from one line to another. So they can manage crises like social one, like international one, like economical one. So multiplication of crises on diverse layers that could impact the nation or social groups which are targeted. In order to spread these narratives, they can use a lot of triggers. Once again, some are the good old one that we already used during the active measures of the KGB, like using people who can be, let's say, people of influence because they are ideologically linked because of money, because, the mice, money, ideology, corruption, or evil. Of course, they also use fake NGO, fake foundation like we have. Not to mention it, but just often the FBI knows the one that you are thinking about, but the other one who was part of the Prigozhin galaxy and is operating in Africa and especially in Niger. They were very active in the last coup. They also can use new technologies that we were talking about, and I am going, near and near, and maybe into the specialty of my colleague. So everybody knows stack puppets who are well known in order to make a growing effect on some narratives. We all know about data collection on social networks that are helping to draft psychological metrics profile in order to adapt the populations that you want to target, like it has been discovered for the first time by the public opinion, like with Cambridge Analytica. You can also have a creation of very large network aiming at spreading the narrative in order to put it viral. And we could just talk about Portal Combat, which have been highlighted by Viginum in French, which is now for 3 years active and had huge results. And of course, if we are talking about AI, we can talk about GANs, who helps in order to create deepfakes. And I think that many of you have seen the special gift for the President Putin birthday that happened in Crimea with the last deepfake, which was quite funny indeed. And of course, we can talk about the LLM, generative AI, which could help in order to produce very quickly content to the terrestrial content that can be even stolen to real journals and magazines. Deepfakes, talking about audio, and you talk about that. We all remember here is the deepfake that happened during the election race in Slovakia, and during the standby period, and that was spread on the social networks. So it is crossing all the red line of the, let's say, legal framework, saying, okay, it's not on the political side. And the point is, which is the effect? Something which is quite new, and I like to emphasize, is the way that you can monetize the own influence operations that you are leading. This is something quite new, and I think that we have to put a special interest on it. What am I explaining with that? We have seen a lot of, let's say, Telegram channels who are particularly known to be linked with the Russian DoD or with Wagner No African Corps, which are using ads on their networks in order to make money. If you are talking about, not to mention them, War Gonzo or Grey Zone, per publication, they can touch something like 1,500 pounds for once, or something like few hundreds of pounds. It is not trivial. And these kind of things can appear also on websites who are created by AI, so very shortly created. And you can empathize the flux and the traffic on it using other sock puppets and AI. And by that way, you increase the price of the ads and you can sell the price. So you have something like a circular financement of the influence and of the disinformation. Of course, it is not money for all the analysis. That is something that we had to keep an attention on that. It also could help like money laundering for some parts, and some people can be really tricked. That could have been very efficient in the African continent. And I am thinking about some YouTube channels who are pretty close with yellow press, as we can say, like very specific enough. And closer to you, I think I'm running out of time, so maybe it's the last thing. Yeah, in just one thing, they could distort like share for click for share and paying systems to ask people just to share for money some narratives. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you for the many things you said. We will stay in the eastern neighborhood, but this time from Bucharest, and we will talk about especially Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, which are also indeed very interesting examples. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Romain. So we have our speaker on this important topic, propaganda and disinformation narrative used by the Russia Federation, the electoral campaigns in the Republic of Moldova and Georgia. Our expert, she is Dr. Angela Grămadă. Therefore, for 7 minutes, Angela, you have the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Flavius, for the presentation, and also I would like to thank you, the organizers, for the kind invitation addressed to us as well. And I'm very happy that we have a very Eastern European panel represented here, because even if I'm identifying myself as a Romanian, I'm coming from the Republic of Moldova, and I will be involved in these elections as a voter this week. And for us, indeed, it's a crucial vote for our European integration. And I spent my last a couple of weeks reading, analyzing, and talking about what is happening in the Republic of Moldova, what is happening in Georgia as well, because they have also elections, parliamentary elections, 1 week after the Republic of Moldova. And I saw a lot of common elements that can be identified in both countries. And I would like to speak a little bit about these kind of common elements. Indeed, Russian propaganda and disinformation narratives are a lot used by Russian Federation, by Moscow, to interfere in these elections. But I would like to highlight the fact that both countries are parliamentarian countries. So if for Georgia this is the final stage of their electoral cycle, for Moldova it's the pre-last elections before the parliamentarian elections. But we have a special event happening together with these presidential elections. That means the referendum. The referendum to change the constitution in the Republic of Moldova and to include there the European strategic objective of the country. That's why Russia is trying to interfere and to put a lot of pressure on the governmental authorities of the Republic of Moldova. So, to continue the analysis of the main elements on which the propaganda and disinformation mechanism is based, both in Moldova and Georgia, I would like to define the main actors that are involved in this process. In both cases, we see a lot of political parties involved in spreading disinformation and propaganda. In Moldova, we have more pro-Russian political parties. In Georgia, it's a little bit different. There are only several political parties that are trying to promote the strategic partnership with Russia. But for them, it's enough to have Georgian Dream, that it's promoting the model of the regime that we have right now in Russia, and this makes very difficult for the voters to fight against this disinformation and propaganda, because the governmental party has the tools in her hands. Also, we have the Orthodox churches in Moldova and Georgia. Both of them are involved in the electoral campaigns. In Moldova, they are collecting signatures for the pro-Russian candidates. In Georgia, they are just involved in spreading narratives and propaganda about these traditional values that are very important as well for both countries. I mean, for Moldova, but also for Georgia. And they are spreading disinformation about the European Union, about European integration process, and they are trying to increase the fear of the voters before the elections. Also, we have televisions associated with pro-Russian narratives, both in Moldova and in Georgia. In Georgia, these are state or public televisions because they are in the hands of the Georgian Dream. In Moldova, we have some media outlets that are associated with the fugitive oligarch from Moldova, Ilan Shor, that is now based in Moscow. We are also have our local political actors, and I mentioned already them. They are pro-Russian candidates and pro-Russian political countries that are spreading disinformation and propaganda. And now I would like to mention what are the topics that they are including in their electoral campaigns. The first one is the fear of war in both states. In Georgia, Georgian Dreams claims that they made everything possible to avoid the war, like in Ukraine, and for them, Euromaidan is a bad thing because this is why Moscow has extended the aggression against Ukraine. In Moldova, the political actors, pro-Russian political actors, they claim that the governmental authorities that are now in power in the Republic of Moldova, they would like Moldova to join as well this war in Ukraine. Ukrainization of Georgia. This is what means the war for Georgian dream. It's the term used to describe the fear of a similar process. Yes, okay, thank you. Another topic is the bad economic interaction with Russia for both countries. It's a common topic. You can find a lot of arguments that are used by political actors in this case. Also, a topic related to Euro-Atlantic integration, and I think this is very important because in Moldova they are using forced Romanization, and the fear against the how to say imperialist goal of Romania against Republic of Moldova. In Georgia, they are using Turcophobia. Turkey and Romania are both NATO countries, and they are trying to push this narrative within the society to spread the fear. And I think that we should mention here the fact that indeed both countries are at the crossroads, and it's very important to vote more that they can falsify during the election. And if I have also here citizens of the Republic of Moldova that are hearing me, I will invite you to vote. I will not tell you for whom to vote, but I will invite you to vote on Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Angela, you exactly stay on time, so I don't know how to already plan your speech, but it was a great one. Moving to our next important neighbor, Poland, our colleague Dr. Olga Zakharova will present certain thoughts related to the Lukashenko regime's transformation and the Kremlin malign influence network in Belarus. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Well, Belarus is, I cannot say that it's always an elephant in the room. It's a little bit smaller than an elephant. But let's say if Russia is an elephant in the room, then Belarus is probably a hippo. It's very important to understand probably that Belarus became a laboratory for Kremlin technologies of taking over a state, of de facto vassalizing it, and it's important part not only in full-fledged aggression against Ukraine, but actually in a larger scale, showing that if you are nice to Putin, then probably you will be fine and just fine as Lukashenko is. So if we look at the bigger picture, we see that currently, unfortunately, Belarus is a source of instability in the region. It's a training and production ground for Russians, but it's also a way to promote this Soviet-Russian imperial nostalgia, right? And now when you look backwards, 30 years ago, when Lukashenko de facto came to power and decided not to give it up, you can see how all this Kremlin imperial playbook actually played out in Belarus. So it's so charismatic that you can see in the steps, like first you find either a local power-hungry dictator that is willing to cede a big chunk of country's sovereignty in exchange for endless staying in power. Well, in some cases, you work through parliament, but for Kremlin, of course, it's easier to work through one person. Then you assist in blowing up security apparatus that will actually keep people from protesting full-fledged in the streets. You can kill some of their opponents. That actually happened at the early stages and was, in practice, and actually still in practice in Belarus. And then you make country dependent. So if you look at the former Soviet Union countries, it's that those countries who actually decided to stay closer to Russia became extremely dependent economic and energy-wise, and unfortunately Belarus is the country. As our Lithuanian colleagues say, well, freedom is a very costly thing, and you have to venture, you have to become full-fledged independent. Well, then of course you involve propaganda, you involve, as it was said before, cultural genocide to make people believe that they are part of this grand scheme and grand project. Now, it's a very peculiar situation that actually, though Russia succeeded in taking a big part of Belarusian state over, they were unable to take over Belarusian conscience. This is a very unique situation. We at iSense have our own sociology polling service, and we still see that Belarusians, despite all those tons of propaganda that being poured on them every day, especially after 2020, they still feel themselves as a part of Europe, as a European nation, as opposing to Russian imperial project. So this is something to think about. So far, what kind of propaganda works is actually promoting the idea that, as it was again said already, you don't want things to happen as it was in Ukraine. So Lukashenko is saying that I'm saving you from the war that is next door. Russians are saying, well, no one expects you in the West and you're so dependent on us economy and especially energy, you can't go anywhere. Well, unfortunately, this is the part that people kind of believe. What they don't believe that NATO is a huge threat, it's just 29%. It's given the scale of propaganda, it's a very low figure. Only 5% actually would like to see Belarus as a part of aggression against Ukraine. So this is why Russians need, and I mean the Kremlin, they need to kind of step up in the efforts. And now they, after 2020 and the revolution that you probably know, they gained more access to Belarusian information and educational space. So now there is this attempt to destroy Belarusian national identity, to Russify the education, to decrease hours in the school of instruction in foreign languages. It's absolutely a decrease of instruction in Belarusian languages. So there is an attempt to indoctrinate Belarusians into this Russian world. And I think that it's a very exemplary case of re-educating Ukrainian abducted children in Belarus, because together with Belarus, well, it's actually a Russian system of indoctrination of younger people, the system of military clubs, the system of teaching history, etc., etc. So far, as I said, Belarus became a source of instability. We are now working on scenarios what would happen if Lukashenko stays in power and no democratic transition is happening in Belarus for the next 3, 5, 6 years. And unfortunately, especially if NATO is not strong enough, there is no other scenario that we will see another round of aggression from the grounds of Belarus, that it will be used again, just it was like used in 2022 to invade Ukraine from Belarusian part. And well, if for those who know the geography, you can see that Bucha and Irpin Bucha tragedy would be absolutely impossible if Lukashenko would not have opened the borders. So I will stop here. I'm just putting on the table that there is a country that is an example of how Russia is treating its closest neighbors and how they're trying to rebuild the empire.
Thank you very much. Dear Olga, you brought to discussion very relevant points about Belarus situation. Now back to Paris. Romain, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers for the different study cases, different countries, very interesting, different experiences, but also common trends. And I would like now to focus on another region that is not less interesting, which is the Western Balkans, region that we a bit forget for a long time here in Europe, especially in Western Europe, but which is a region that is extremely important. Since 2022, we try to go back to this interest to the Western Balkans to some extent. And now we know that it's also very important to re-engage. It's very important also to talk about what is going on there, about the developments, and also when it comes to foreign malign influences, interference operations from diverse actors, not only Russia. And this is what I would like to ask, and to start with Tefta. So please tell us how it functioned there. Is it different or not different?
Thank you very much, Romain, and I'm happy to be here and discuss this important topic. I would like to start by just setting a bit the context in the Western Balkans, which is very different from the Eastern European region and new candidate countries. First, because the EU has a longer and closer relationship with the Western Balkans, which actually has been established as early as 1999 through a Stabilization and Stability Pact, further reinforced with the Stabilization and Association Agreement signed, which have given a perspective for EU membership as early as 2004. This is to just explain that the EU's engagement in the region has been strong, both politically, diplomatically, as well as economically, for a longer time. It is also a region, however, where there is a double hybridity challenge, in the sense that all countries in the region still experience a level of hybrid governance, which is defined by some level of democratic rule, but combined with autocratic governance techniques, with leaders that still try to grip the power and control institutions, but also a sense of instability due to either prone conflict countries or political instability. So why this is important in the context of malign or foreign interference is that the higher the level of hybridity of these regimes, the higher is the interference from foreign actors, meaning these countries remain vulnerable, they have a weak rule of law, their democracies are weak, and this is where Europe needs to still focus in really strengthening its investment on democracy, support of democracy, both, of course, on strengthening rule of law, but as well investing more on bottom-up democratic initiatives by investments in free media, training of journalists, media literacy, but also civil society organizations and all of that. So this is something that is still, unfortunately, not at the level that it should be in the region, and where the EU has a direct role, and it can continue improving it. Don't you know? I have a very sorry. From this, I would like to now start on just mentioning Russia, because Russia has indeed a long history of engaging, unfortunately, in the country. It is an old actor. The primary objective of Russia in the Western Balkans is not at all the same as in the Eastern Europe. There is no objective of military intervention, occupation, or invasion, but the objective in the Balkans is certainly to disturb the region's Euro-Atlantic integration, especially in NATO. We have noticed a stronger interference from Russia as starting from the military intervention of NATO in Belgrade, in Serbia, in 1999. This has intensified further with the start of accession of the first countries from the region in NATO, so Albania 2009, North Macedonia 2017, Montenegro 2017, and North Macedonia 2020. This is where Russia's operations have intensified. These at the time and in general have usually been through intelligence operation, but also cooperation with proxies that Russia had leverage on in governments in these countries, intelligence, cooperation between intelligence service, just operations of intelligence services in these countries. And over the time, it has intensified, and this is where we come to FIMI, it has intensified especially its information operations in the region, increasing its impact, especially in shaping narratives. And what we have seen is that these narratives are usually anti-EU, trying to portray NATO as a weak actor, projecting Russia's power as the only, especially using the Orthodox Church, where the Orthodox churches are present, also cooperation of the Serbian Orthodox Church with the Russian Orthodox Church to play on the pan-Slavic sentiments, to influence also political developments, but also shape narratives against the West. It has also aimed at reducing the trust that the populations have for EU integration process and enlargement. And maybe this can be explained by the fact that, for example, 12 years ago in Serbia, the support for the EU stood at 75% approximately. Today, it is as low as 32, more or less. Russia has also used more recently tactical influence operations that have aimed at fueling ethnic tensions. And this, I mean, it was very useful that Christine made a presentation about, what is Russia's playbook on information operations and intelligence operations. And this is the same playbook in the Balkans, though the objectives is different. So it has also used the operations tactically to fuel ethnic tensions, specifically in Kosovo. It has used operations to promote secessionist ideas of Bosnia's Republika Srpska's president. It has helped Serbia defend its stance on the denial of the Srebrenica during the UN General Assembly vote. And how it does this is simply by flooding the information space ahead of these events or during these events, setting informational conditions. And this has become more and more the trend of recent years, unfortunately, which has improved, at least it has increased the occupation of Russia of the information space. And this has been done primarily, obviously, through Serbia, where the Russian media channels are still legal and through which Russia operates and spreads its narrative. But also, especially from social media channels and accounts, recently also there is a trend of using more AI tools to generate fake accounts and all of that. There is also a new recent issue of recruiting young social media influencers, sending them for trainings in Russia and returning them to Belgrade. So this is becoming more and more serious. And I think the EU is informed about it, but unfortunately remains at the defensive side, meaning it focuses a lot on how to build the resilience of these countries to counter these operations. But this has not proven yet to be effective on either countering them or creating a balance by maybe, and this is more of a recommendation, of really approaching the information space as a competitive market where EU needs to have its share and actually have its own operations of trying to shape narratives in its that go along with its strategy. And I'm sure there are legal ways of doing it, and that requires some thinking. I will end with Russia here and very briefly tackle China, which wasn't discussed so much in the previous panels, but in the Balkans, China is an important actor. It's a more recent actor than Russia. Its main interest is not the region per se, but its proximity with the EU and Europe. For China, Europe represents a very important market for exports, which is why the biggest and most strategic initiative that is region-wide for Western Balkans is the China-Europe Land Sea Express route, which is the transport corridor that connects China and Europe via Greece and the Western Balkans. This is part of the Belt and Road Initiative of China. China government doesn't have a specific Western Balkans for policy, but it has it operates through bilateral cooperations with each country. Of course, its regional hub, it's Serbia again, unfortunately, which it has established strategic cooperation with as early as 2009 and further strengthened it in 2013 and actually advanced it to comprehensive strategic agreement in 2016. It is, according to a study conducted by investigative journalists, the totality of Chinese projects and investments in the Balkans from 2009 to 2021 amount to 32 billion. In Serbia alone, this amount stands at something like 10.3 billion. To give you a comparison, the EU's economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans aims for 2021-27 aims to invest in the region with up to 20,000 billion. So this is already states it's below what China has been doing in the past decade. There has been recently, if you have followed the news, a high-level visit of Xi Jinping in Serbia, where 28 new agreements were signed. And beyond these agreements were related to cooperation in space research and development, 5 of them between Serbian and Chinese media as well. Several were just dedicated to the operationalization of free trade agreements. And the one that actually created most problems and requires some further research as to what this means is why the Serbian side also claims it as a historic agreement, is that they have pledged to build a shared future, which goes beyond just economic cooperation and involves requires research, but it could be read as Serbia somehow submitting as well to some ideological political culture or sharing that and endorsing it. Of course, China has other infrastructure projects elsewhere in the Balkans. Usually these are roads, railways. The problem is that these cooperation agreements come with very dangerous clauses in them, which give actually China some rights over the sovereignty on some of these countries. We have seen what happened with Montenegro's loan and how that turned out wrong. And it could have been worse, but it was saved by the EU. But this is the case of all these agreements that are signed also with Serbia, which have very dangerous clauses. But I do not follow very closely the Chinese investment, but there are some very good, if you are interested, experts who are following it much more closely. And I don't know if you want me to talk about Turkey, but I think it's not.
Go in the follow-up also.
Thank
questions. Thank you very much, Tefta. And back to Bucharest to continue on the Western Balkans.
Yes, thank you very much, Romain. We are continuing here in Bucharest with Professor Miruna Bunaru-Troncoto. She will present us a few selected cases of foreign malign influences documented in Romania and the Balkans. Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I also have a brief presentation, which I hope it will help me to stick to the 7 minutes, if my colleagues will help. Actually, I wanted to thank the previous speaker for very, very detailed presentation on the main threats in the Western Balkans, and I'm very happy that China was mentioned, because I would also mention it, but I would not enter into such bigger details. Because I'm a professor, I like definitions, so I think we need some definitions on the table, and those are the official definitions of the main actors that we are working with, also in this room, European Union and NATO. So foreign malign influence defined by the EAS, the most recent EAS report, part of the strategic compass of the European Union, defines it as a mostly non-illegal pattern of behavior that threatens or has the potential to negatively impact values, procedures, and political processes. I'm underlying this because I think it's relevant. Such activity is manipulative, intentional, and coordinated by state or non-state actors, including proxies inside and outside their territory. And this definition also needs to have, of course, a legal background for legal measures. That's why I think it's important for us to have it on board. Now, in terms of NATO or the United States definition from the FBI, which are very similar in a way, FIMI is defined as activities aimed at disruptive democratic institutions using disinformation, cyber attacks, and covert operations. So it's much wider. I would say that the European Union definition, in a way, it's a bit more targeted and useful from a legal point of view, even though this one allows for a wider use. Sorry. So in terms of common tactics that we can find in both EAA reports and FBI reports, and they were already mentioned, so I will not repeat them, right? Manipulation, espionage, disinformation. Now, in terms of FIMI actions in Romania, it's important to have in mind, of course, Romania's strategic position and the fact that it's by itself a target, and the tactics that have been visible, at least the ones that have been officially identified by the national authorities, the NSC and the Romanian Intelligence Service, include disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, and manipulation of public trust. And out of all these three, I would say the third one is, in a way, the most evasive to be first identified, and second also to be actioned upon. Now, I selected some real-life case studies. This one is from the DNSC, and it is Russia was identified as being a coordinator, so copying real websites that are being imitated in order to host them and to use them as fraudulent websites by disseminating misinformation and to manipulate public opinion. And of course, the whole idea of copying these websites is, of course, to undermine the trust in authentic media. So practically, this leads to relativization, saying, okay, so practically I cannot trust any website because it might be a fraud, right? And these are three examples offered by the DNSC report. They are actually copying real life, real websites, but they are offering fake information. And another case is, of course, the Killnet attack, pro-Russian group who launched cyber attacks on Romanian institutions. This is very well known from 2022. But the idea was, to erode again trust, right? Saying that if such important institutions have problems with their essential infrastructure, then of course this brings a lot of suspicion regarding our capacity for resilience, right? And this has been documented by the Romanian Secret Service. So going a bit further, of course, we have even cyber attacks that have been directly coordinated by the Russian Secret Services, and this has been published by the Cyber International Center, where practically cyber espionage activities have been targeting Romanian government networks, especially after the war in Ukraine started. And there is consistent data on this, and they have been made public also for public awareness reasons. Now, let's go a little bit to the Balkans. Here, I identified an example from North Macedonia because there is a huge flood of Russian disinformation, especially on the topic of NATO in North Macedonia, because there's a lot of sensitivity in North Macedonia, both Euro-Atlantic and NATO integration. And Russian media practically focused on the NATO military exercises that have taken place in North Macedonia, claiming that actually they were against national sovereignty and they were practically limiting the country's sovereignty, accusing, of course, NATO of interference against the country's sovereignty. Another case is vaccine disinformation. In the time of COVID, during the COVID pandemic, Russian sources, all of them targeting and using the same message at the same time. This is a strategy that I think other speakers talked about. Spread vaccine skepticism at the same time with anti-Western narrative, saying don't get vaccinated because this is what EU and NATO want to do, and they want to do this in order to undermine your national pride or national interest. So skepticism on a healthcare topic became skepticism against West. Now, as the previous speaker mentioned, there is also an important foreign malign influence from of a Chinese source, but we don't have, let's say, such concrete examples as in the case of Russia. But China has expanded over the last years, not only in Serbia, but also in North Macedonia through economic means, especially through the Belt and Road initiatives. And this investment, this economic measure that is also very intrusive and very political, has been considered already by major intelligence services as part of foreign malign influence. So I think it's important for us to be aware of the fact that foreign malign influence is already a phenomenon that can be identified. We can gather evidence, even open source evidence on this. And I think it's an important step that such important institutions like EU, NATO, FBI, or national intelligence services services are publishing widely their reports, drawing attention on how this is going on. Of course, some people are fearing that if this is made so public, this can become a weakness, right? Because then the adversary becomes aware that we know, right? They know that we know, and this becomes a weakness. But on the other hand, I think we live in such an interconnected world, and we are now in a certain stage of strategic decision-making in which we need legal solutions. We need practically countries, governments need to take measures to boost up our resilience against this. And in order to do that, we need to share among ourselves how to identify them and how to combat them. So I think these are the main elements that we should take away from these examples. Some of them are very similar, looking at Romania and Western Balkans, EU member state and non-EU member states, but also NATO member states as North Macedonia. We need international cooperation, like forum like here. We need media literacy at the overall general population level, and we need robust cybersecurity measures. All of these are very important for the multi-layered phenomenon of foreign malign influence. And of course, I'm open to offer more details on the case studies. I just wanted not to repeat myself and just to throw these ideas that I'm open to discuss for the Q&A. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bunalu Tronkota. Now, our colleague, professor from Poland, Konrad Pawlowski. We are very eager to listen to your thoughts on Russia's influence in the Balkans, its conditioning, mechanisms, instruments, and goals. Please, you have the floor, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, my presentation would be quite similar to some other authors. So, but let me just sum up some of the main thoughts about the Russian influence. By the way, I'm not talking about the influence in a very general sense, because there is nothing bad in the monument to Pushkin in Podgorica, I guess. But even those, let's say, stepping stones can be, in the end, can be used by Russia to create some kind of situation which is beneficial for Russia. That's why we should talk about the malign influence, not influence in a very general sense. Let me be very clear. So what would be the goal or objective of the Russian influence in the region? And let's say from the very present perspective, it would be something like to stop support for Ukraine from the Western countries. I mean, to create another problematic situation in the region in Europe. And then I think Russia expects this to be a natural limitation for the Western support sent to Ukraine. That would be my very recent conclusion. But from the geopolitical perspective, I think Russia wants to limit the influence of the Western states in the region, EU, United States, Western institutions. So it would be a kind of geopolitical rivalry. Russia wants to transform Balkans into some hub that would bypass politically unstable Ukraine and maybe Poland from the Russian perspective, and to use this hub to transit the gas and oil from Russia to Western Europe. Russia wants to keep the position of one of the key negotiators in the discussion about the future of the Western Balkans. I mean, one of the countries who would determine the final solution to Balkan conflicts which are there in place. I think Russian perspective is the perspective from the old time, and this is something like the concept of the concert of powers, like of great powers. And that's why Russia wants to keep Balkans as a part of its own sphere of influence. I mean, maybe a kind of gray zone between the West and East, or Russia, or the bridge between the West and East, or buffer zone separating Russia from post-Soviet area, and post-Soviet area from the Western democracies and the processes of Europeanization, which could be danger for Russia in the future. And Russia, of course, it's interested in the continuation of the Balkan conflicts because it would guarantee that those Western Balkan countries would not join EU or NATO in the future. And by the way, talking about the effectiveness of this, Russia is fortunately not that much effective in achieving some of its goals. That's for good, of course. And so they cannot change the dynamics, general dynamics of the situation in the region, but they have abilities or instruments to create some kind of disruptive situation here and there. That's why I skip to the instruments or mechanism of Russian influence. Of course, emphasizing Russian historical, cultural and religious ties with the Balkan region. I mean, there are created sometimes political myths, but they are still there. And of course, there are some historical facts, like say, which cannot be ignored. So Russia is using this. Exposing and fueling intra-state divisions, political, social, or religious, and international disputes. So we can see that Russia is supporting almost the same actors, like radical political actors, for example, in North Macedonia and Bulgaria. But previously it was the same in Greece and North Macedonia. So the goal was clear, to fuel the conflict, not let it to end with some kind of peaceful solution. So Russia is supporting, promoting, and enhancing some kind of political actors, like actors with some kind of revisionist political narratives. So radicals from the right side and from the left side are always on the Russian radar, and Russia has always wanted to use them for its own purposes, just to create a kind of conflict. And yeah, of course, supporting and legitimizing local political leaders who are sometimes accused of serious violations of the rule of law and modern democracy. I don't want to put the names here, but we know that the Western Balkan countries have a lot of problems with the, let's say, European standards, and it's still there on the table. And building informal personal relationship and client relationship in the world of regional politics and business. And it's connected with behind the scenes political pressure, friendly blackmail, and political corruption. So I think Russia sees all its own allies, as a kind of client states, and it's using this as a kind of mechanism behind the curtain mechanism, behind the diplomatic door. It's always a kind of pressure from Russia, and yeah, using energy dependence of some Western Balkan countries, and supporting. It was mentioned here, supporting anti-Western, pro-Russian discourse in public debate and social media, which is clearly visible, and determinants. Of course, what are the determinants of Russian foreign policy towards the Balkans? I think the nature of Russian foreign policy, it's like always like an expansionist one, like, so it's always like geopolitical rivalry in the region. Russia, from Tsarist Empire until today, it's the same. And I mentioned historical and cultural ties. It's natural context, and for that reason, for example, Serbia, it's easy target, or Bulgaria maybe to some extent, it's easy target for Russia because of those historical ties. Political myths, I said, the unfinished democratization and modernization of the Western Balkan states and societies. This is a particularly interesting context because Russia, like China, by the way, China was mentioned here, they both like this shadowy world of Balkan politics, number of informal rules, gray zone of economy, mafia activity. This is the environment which is good for Russian and Chinese influence in the Balkans. And effects, I said Russia is fortunately not that effective in the achieving of those goals, but I think this influence is particularly dangerous because it blocks the integration of the Western Balkans into the European mainstream, and it's especially it's especially dangerous now. I mentioned this in the context of Ukraine, and it would be a historical mistake if European countries do not show a more political will towards the integration of the Western Balkans, because we're living in a time when we don't see, like, the future is very complex. Of course, some countries in the Balkans waiting for President Trump to come back and do some deals. So this is the time of uncertainty. And that's why I think EU should show more decisiveness towards the Balkan region. So maybe I stop here, and thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Pawlowski. Now back to Paris. Romain, you have the floor for the next speaker.
Thank you very much. And the good news is that we will talk about recommendation. This is the last and final part of this panel discussion. The sad part is that we are coming to an end, but I know that it's already 2 hours, so this is when we should come to an end. But before that, we were supposed to have some discussion about what we can collectively do. What can the EU, NATO, Romania, France, all the countries do together and try to tackle the challenges in our neighborhoods. We have a speaker that is blocked in the train, and no, it's not about strike this time, it's about dysfunctioning of the train, but I think that we will keep this short panel on basically what can France do, and then we will engage into a collective discussion asking from Romania and from France what we can do together, what we can do separately, what we can do with the EU, with NATO. But first, I will ask Pierre to talk to us about the role of France in our neighborhood, knowing that France has evolved, strategically speaking.
Thank you very much. That's my pleasure to be invited in this event. I would like to take a step back in the discussion and make a distinction vis-a-vis the different remarks that we have heard. I think there is, in this discussion about foreign malign influence, a tactical level, that is the level of the technologies, the methods that we can identify in this fight. And on the other hand, you'll have also a strategic level. That is, why are we vulnerable to this narrative, to this influence, and how can we, as states, as an alliance, as a union, be less vulnerable, be stronger in the face of these narratives? I think we have already talked a lot about trust, and I will underline this because I think this is really the crucial capital in this discussion. Trust has been described as the main target of foreign malign influence operations. When you want to undermine trust in a particular country, in a particular society, but also among countries, among partners, among allies. Trust is also, and it has been said as well, trust is also the main vulnerability, because we know that Russia will always be happy to use pre-existing trust issues that might exist in a particular country or among partners to be more effective. So to say a few words about how we can be affected and weakened by this attempt to weaken our trust vis-a-vis one another. I really believe that, in particular vis-a-vis the Ukraine war, at the end of this conflict, whatever this end looked like, trust will be a crucial factor in our assessment of whether or not this is a victory or a defeat for us collectively. If at the end of this conflict, Ukraine feels abandoned by its partners and allies and feels that it cannot really trust Europeans in particular, if at the end of this conflict, Eastern Europeans do not feel that they cannot trust Western Europeans because they did not receive the level of commitment and support that they wanted to receive in this conflict, then it would be a great victory for Russia. And I think this is the end goal for Russia, basically. Russia doesn't hope that it will eventually be able to militarily control Europe, but that it will have weakened trust and confidence in Europe, so that it will eventually be able to divide and rule in Europe. And I think it is a realistic hope, because trust is always a challenge, in particular in these times of war. So our ability to maintain and even strengthen mutual trust between allies and Ukraine and within the alliance, within the Union, is a crucial capital, and it might be a decisive battle in this conflict eventually. Now, what about the vulnerability? I want to give just one example to be very quick. When French President Macron talked about in February, talked about the boots on the ground option and the nothing is excluded doctrine, some of my Ukrainian colleagues told me that there was also a debate in Ukraine that indirectly might be the outcome of some pro-Russian influence. And the argument was basically, we should not trust France. Why should we trust what the French president is saying? The French are not doing so much for Ukraine. They are not so committed for the defense of Ukraine. This is just for the show. This is not a genuine commitment. We should not trust them. And also making comparisons between France and other partners such as Germany. Of course, it might be that this narrative was encouraged and stimulated by pro-Russian agents. And as you see, the narrative was not just that Ukraine has to abandon or to surrender to Russia, but that Ukraine could not trust its partners and its allies. And that's why I believe that actually this whole debate was also important, not just for technical reasons or military reasons in terms of supporting the military effort that Ukraine is doing on the front line, but also for political and trust-related issues. Because there are, I think, two ways that can strengthen trust among partners. One is credible signals or costly signals. When you do something that is actually costly, you can be credible in saying that it's not just a cheap talk, but it illustrate a genuine and sincere commitment that you want to solidify over time. And also mutual experience, of course, is also a factor that can solidify trust. And that's why I think that this debate that was launched at the beginning of this year on whether or not we could strengthen our commitment and our presence and visibility in Ukraine was positive on that front. And there is also a second angle, not directly vis-a-vis Ukraine, but also among partners and allies that I wanted to stress, because it's directly related to the relationship between France and Romania. So this is also connected to the op-ed that Romain and I have published today in the daily Le Monde in Paris. But behind the military dimension, I think trust is the key issue of the debate that we wanted to contribute to. Basically, we said that it would be a good idea if France could consider making its military presence in Romania at the level of a brigade, according to what NATO is basically trying to encourage at the moment, a permanent format, a permanent structure. So not just temporarily during a short time exercise, but basically mimicking what Germany is doing in Lithuania to have a similar kind of stronger presence close to the front line from France in Romania. And I won't talk here about the military dimension, which is important, but about the political dimension and the trust-related dimension. Of course, in the debate about European defense in the past, trust has been a challenge. There are many people in Eastern Europe, for good or bad reasons, who do not trust France's commitment, and it has to be acknowledged. And many people who say, because they believe it, or sometimes because they are also agents of foreign influence, because I know that it's sometimes the case, that at the end, Western European actors will be happy to stab Eastern Europe in the back, or to abandon it, or to let Ukraine and more generally Eastern Europe in a very bad situation to have a favorable deal or an apparently favorable deal with Russia. So this is also something that we have to fight against, and making and I think that a very positive trend has emerged starting in 2023, when France really tried to engage in a direct rapprochement with all the Eastern flank countries, and to make its commitment to the defense of the European continent more credible. I think it is also a question of credibility for the broader project of European, even EU, in a cooperation and integration. Because it has been the case in the past that when European initiatives were put forward by France, some suspicion could exist in other countries on whether or not there was a genuine interest in defending Europe, or just in basically taking a national advantage, in finding a national advantage in this EU initiative, without really strengthening the security of Eastern Europeans vis-à-vis Russia. So I think that these credible and also costly decisions are useful, because they can strengthen our mutual trust, and eventually, even if it's not directly related to the question of foreign influence, they will make us stronger vis-à-vis all the attempts to develop malign narratives according to which we cannot trust one another. Because, as I said earlier, I believe that one of the decisive battles at the end of this war will be about this, precisely our mutual trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre, to make it clear that it's about mutual trust and mutual understanding. And I suggest that we open up for the discussion now on what we can collectively do, and starting from the Romanian speakers. This is your turn, Bucharest.
Right, thank you very much, Romain. Of course, we have also few reactions. It's time to open also from our side the discussion. So, firstly, we'll comments with our speakers from Bucharest side, and after that we're moving also to Paris. So the question still, as Romain also mentioned, what can we do to tackle this challenge and to help our neighborhoods? We'll start on the same order that you already presented your speeches. General Hormuz, you have the floor. If you have few reactions on this subject.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank all the panelists, and especially to the panelists from Paris, for all the excellent ideas which were put on the table. On the last speaker, I would like to fully support what was mentioned there. I will also like to understress the fact that the Black Sea is a very special area of interest for Russia. We have a full-fledged war here. We have hybrid activities. And we need also to plan for the future, because in 2027, Romania and Turkey will start exploiting the gas in the Black Sea. All these areas are in the exclusive economic zone of the two NATO countries. And this is not covered by Article 5. And in this respect, we need all the great minds, all the great ideas to think and find the best solution. Because in 2027, when Romania will start exploiting these resources, will be the biggest gas producer in the European Union. And we are convinced that Russia will do its best, if I may say, to try to stop that happening in the hybrid way, in any way possible. So how can we cooperate bilaterally, regionally, in the NATO and EU to make that thing be a success? On the trust thing, I fully agree, and I'm very impressed with what France was doing since the full invasion of Ukraine happened. We have to discuss more and find the ways and have something similar to what the US EUCOM has, the so-called Russia Strategic Initiative. We need also in Europe to have these efforts developed to better understand. I'm also very happy to hear so many French speakers talking about the Russian active measures. In reality, I'm saying that, and I'm ready to be contradicted if I'm wrong, but what we see now from Russia, it's active measure on steroids, and we need to be ready and able to counter that. And one last point, I think that in Europe, we need, exactly in line with the last speaker, we need to start practicing escalation management in a smart way, without encouraging any escalation. But unless we are capable and willing to practice the escalation management with the Russians, they will not take us seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. Yes, I think the most relevant keyword in our discussion is trust. Moving to our speaker, Dr. Angela Grămadă, please, if you have certain remarks.
Not remarks, but I'd like to answer to your question regarding the support that can NATO and EU provide to countries like Georgia and Moldova, and maybe some thoughts for Romania as a country with a special status in the region. Regarding the military capabilities of the Republic of Moldova, it's very important to continue this support, even if there are some voices that will argue against it in Moldova. A neutral country like Moldova needs the increase of the investment in the security, because we have Transnistria and we are so close to the war. And Russia, it's very powerful to insist in these narratives on neutrality of the Republic of Moldova, being the only country that is neglecting this principle. And that's why I will support the authorities and the government of the Republic of Moldova to increase their own military capabilities with the support of NATO countries like Romania, first of all. Secondly, I think that there is we need urgently strategic communication from Romanian side, because this quiet diplomacy, it's not very efficient in the region. And I'm not talking only about the Republic of Moldova, and we received a lot of support from Romanian side, but I'm talking about the other countries. I know that Romania is doing a lot for Ukraine. Romania is advocating also for the EU integration of Georgia, but being very quiet, it's not helping these countries to advance in democratic reforms. And maybe as a suggestion, it will be very useful for our partners from the region, and especially for Georgia now, to release or to publish the last progress report regarding the EU integration of Georgia before the parliamentarian elections. Maybe this will be useful for the citizens of Georgia to put a little bit of pressure on their own government that is still arguing that they made the best and they did the best to get this candidate status for Georgia, because what we are seeing now in that country, we cannot argue that this is a country that is still on the European path. So I will insist on being more precise, being more active regarding the diplomacy, regarding the strategic communication in the region, and especially in the Black Sea region.
Thanks a lot, dear Angela Gramada. Now we are moving to our Polish colleague, Dr. Olga Zaharova. So we are very pleased to ask you to say something on this subject.
Well, thank you. Usually when asked this question, what exactly the EU and NATO could do, my very simple answer is actually get focused. Because if we talk about that one country that is called Belarus, it's the unlucky country that always is slipping between the cracks. It is always something that is happening that's more important than this country. But if you look at the map, you can see that it's a very long neighbor to all NATO, to the NATO countries that are close. It's not only to Poland, but also to Lithuania and Latvia. So, and it's this northern Balcony over Ukraine. So we have to get focused that this country is not becoming or staying part of Russia, is not becoming ground for aggression. Therefore, we have to step up in strategic communications to Belarusian people. And we have clearly split and kind of deepened the rift between the Lukashenko, who is a subservient to Putin, and the Belarusian nation, who is still bearer to the sovereignty. So it's extremely important to give Belarusians hope that they're being welcomed in EU and subsequently in NATO. NATO should probably revise its communication strategy towards Belarus, and I'm quite sure that some people, at least some people in Belarusian army, would be happy to learn how NATO is much better than the Russian army, for example. So we have to be definitive in what we want in the region. And I think that it's kind of quite clear that we have to make Ukraine win and we have to make Belarus democratic. And then we kind of close this gap that is on the NATO border.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olga Zaharova. We are moving from the level of experts to the level of academia. We have here Professor Miruna Bunaru-Troncoto. Please share with us your thoughts.
In order not to repeat the very consistent advice and recommendations that were already mentioned, I will strictly refer to EU and Romania as possible parts of the solution. So what could European Union do in this moment, especially, and I will refer to this concept of trust, which is one of the greatest capital, symbolic capital that European Union is based on, right? But on the other hand, now it's extremely vulnerable. It's attacked from many places, and foreign malign influence is one way to attack this trust. And when we can see this is during European Council meetings, European summits, where we all know that strategic decisions, especially on foreign policy or on very sensitive issues regarding support for Ukraine or enlargement even, are taken by unanimity. And I think one of the elements that is putting trust in trouble in the European Union right now is the discussion around the reform of European Union treaties, right? Changing this unanimity rule in order to avoid possible blockages like the ones created by Hungary, and not only Netherlands, for example, in the case of Schengen for Romania and Bulgaria, and Austria most recently. All these elements, or practically the way EU decision-making system works, has been used as a form of hybrid war, or as a form of deteriorating trust among EU member states. And let's not forget that EU member states are also NATO member states. So this can influence also trust at the military level. So from this point of view, I think we need to understand that on one hand, European Union needs to reform, but it's very important to establish how and whether this reform of the treaties, which will take minimum 2 years, is something we can afford at this moment. Germany and France have published the report last year in September about how this reform should look like and what would be the impact on foreign policy and enlargement. And for Ukraine and Moldova, this reform is absolutely crucial in order not to have any bad surprises and some veto blockages, as it happened to Macedonia and Albania. But at the same time, we need to be very careful, because this can open up a Pandora box of sensitivities of countries that, not only Hungary, again, I underline this, that can feel that maybe for them this is not a priority, and we should not do this with the war at our borders. So this is where I think Romania's strategic position comes, and the fact that we will have a new president starting from next year, a president that will represent Romania in the Council, and it's his or hers foreign policy agenda needs to be, so sophisticated in order to put Romania as a mediator among EU member states and to solve this trust issue in the European Council. I hope this doesn't sound too utopic, but this is me personally, what I would expect from my future president, to put Romania on the map, not only to help Romania's position as a stronghold in the EU decision-making system, but at the same time to be an asset for solving European Union's trust issues and divisions inside the Council. That would be my main idea.
Thank you very much, Professor Bunaru Troncoto. Now we are moving to the last but not the least intervention. Professor, you have the floor.
Yeah.
Pawlowski. Yes. Professor Pawlowski.
Yes, thank you. I would say from the conclusion that probably the most hated words in the Balkans is the momentum and European perspective. So we should bring back the EU soft power and trust into the West by speeding up the enlargement process. I think it was always a political decision, and the time is now. I said many times that the time is now. So the second would be prepare for President Trump and enforce EU military capabilities as a plan B. That would be my advice. The third one, talk honestly about the reform of the EU decision-making process. It's connected with enlargement, it's connected with the security. The time is now as well. And I think we are doing quite good at the moment. I mean, so the continuation of the investment sent to the Balkan region, because in that way, we support stability in the region. That's a fact. And something which is not possible, but I would like to mention, is the removal of historical or cultural disputes from the enlargement process. It's not possible, I know, but it would help. And what not to do, it's probably controversial what I would like to say right now, but pro-European democratic opposition in Serbia is protesting against the Rio Tinto project in Serbia. I think everybody knows that it's about the mining of lithium. China is behind the corner. We know these geopolitical games between EU and China about the lithium electric cars, but in that way we are not supporting democratization of some Balkan countries. It's quite quite pessimistic conclusion. And if Russia wins, it would represent a huge challenge to the Balkans, and everything could be different. So it's better not let Russia to win the war with Ukraine. That would be my final conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Pawlowski. Back to Paris. Maybe you have also a few reactions from speakers that Romania, you are trying to manage them.
Thank you very much. And yes, we have Tefta that would like to comment.
Thank you. So very briefly on some of the key points, and I mentioned some of them already in my presentation, but this is back to square one. But democracy is key, I think, to start with. We have done a very bad job on either consolidating it in the candidate countries and continuing to promote it. So here we have to do a lot more, and we have to really refocus on it and promoting our values, democratic values, and strengthening the rule of law. We have been doing it, but maybe there are some other ways of strengthening our role in it, and we have recently published a paper with some more concrete ideas on how this can be done. This is also unfortunately the case for democracy consolidation and avoiding backsliding in EU member states as well, which is one of the recommendations in the paper. Why this is important is also to actually maintain some form of legitimacy on having this democracy promotion role in our neighborhood, but also on avoiding that decision-making procedures become less and less effective inside the EU, and with regards to the neighborhood as well. Secondly, staying engaged in the region is key. Unfortunately, in the case of Western Balkans, one of the main problems has been the disengaging cycle. And the issue with the EU enlargement losing traction has been also for the period when the Russian and Chinese influence was at its peak. So this again brings me to square two, which is we cannot afford to give up on integrating these countries into EU and NATO. And of course, this is easier said than done, but I think given the current geopolitical context, a lot of what was previously believed as impossible to do is now being done or considered, and we can speak about candidacy of Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova and becoming EU member states one day, but also on how the EU has reacted initially at the initial stage of the war in Ukraine. So things are possible if there is political will, and we really need to focus on strengthening the leadership in EU on taking these big decisions, maintaining enlargement momentum, integrating this country sooner than later, because ultimately this is the only way of actually reducing the influence of malign actors in the region. And here I actually want to stress that in the Balkans, we usually say, oh, Serbia will never become a NATO member. I disagree with that statement. I think NATO's ambition and EU's ambition should be to actually integrate Serbia in NATO, and there's ways on working on that. And then lastly, tackling disinformation. We have also our internal brainstorming exercises on how we can improve our work on this as Europeans. Well, we first have to really start in understanding how disinformation has become increasingly an arm of warfare, and how in an actual confrontation with Russia, we need to adapt our national strategies, some of which is happening already, to include a clear strategy on tackling this new form of warfare in Europe and in the neighborhood. We go as far as also, as I said earlier, the need to explore ways of changing the attitude from being one step behind and reactive or defensive into actually moving more into an offensive approach, where the EU has an interest in occupying the information space and spreading its own values and narratives, and occupying more space for free media and information in the neighborhood. And there should be legal ways that are possible to proceed this way, because usually the counter argument that we get when we talk about this is that, well, we cannot imitate Russia's tactics. And of course, this is not what we're talking about. And lastly, identify vulnerabilities while we are actually aiming for becoming more assertive in the information space. We can already do something that it's easier, which is identify vulnerabilities in each country that Russia is regularly exploiting, and have use tools to actually pre-bunk and not allow Russian narratives to use them and take traction in some of these countries. And maybe I will stop with this.
Thank you very much, Tefta, for this ideas, the suggestions that we can work together on. And this is the last part. Now it's the possibility for the audience to ask questions. I would like you to stay brief because we don't have much time, and it's been a long time that we've been talking. So just stay brief. French audience can ask questions to Romanian speakers, and Romanian speakers can, Romanian audience can ask questions to French speakers. So we will start with France. Do we have any question here? Maybe one. So introduce yourself and be brief.
Thank you. So Aurélien Duchesne, I'm a junior fellow at Eurocreative with Romain and Arthur. And my question is, how would you welcome the idea of Pierre Haroche and Romain Lutignou of a French brigade level military presence in Romania, permanent military presence from France with a huge brigade level of presence?
Thank you very much. And maybe a second one before we go to Bucharest, or no? It's not obliged. We go to Bucharest.
Yeah, thank you very much, Romain. We try to have a short answer from our side. If somebody would like to answer, maybe the most relevant on military side is General Hormuz.
Of course, and I know that the Romanian authorities are trying very, very hard to make it possible for a brigade level French-led NATO unit to be in Romania. At the same time, I believe that we need to start thinking of the specificity of the Black Sea. And in this respect, for a long, long time, I was advocating for trying to build an anti-access area denial hub here in Romania, trying to have all the capabilities necessary, layered for air and naval targets, which could be integrated with the NATO brigade and with the other NATO structures in Romania. I know that at the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, France deployed here this kind of capabilities, long range, able to defend and deter any kind of Russian capabilities to strike on Romania or Romanian interests in the Black Sea. So I believe that if we manage to increase not only the level of the unit, but also the capabilities required specifically for the Black Sea, that would be a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Hormuz. If other speakers from our side, please, Professor.
Yes, just a clarification. I mentioned NATO as a possible, the membership in NATO that which Russia would like to block. But of course, historically, because we all remember that Russia was trying to block the membership of Montenegro and North Macedonia. We remember that this context historical right now, but still. And there are also two countries which are waiting for the membership. It would be Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo. Although in Kosovo, they are saying that although Kosovo is not in NATO, but NATO is in Kosovo, by the way, so it's different context. But in context of Bosnia-Herzegovina, it's really that which is like the chief bone of contention. I mean, the part of the Bosnian society supports the membership in NATO, but the other one is blocking that, and Russia is behind the corner, I would say. So it's still a part of discussion. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Professor Pawlowski. Maybe General Hormuz, if you like also to add something more.
Just for 30 seconds, because I believe that the question was very generous. I also proposed last year that NATO could establish a new NATO standing maritime force in the Black Sea, consisting entirely of naval and air drones, which will be in line with the Montreux Convention. We have to think out of the box, and we have to learn the lessons which our Ukrainian friends and allies were teaching us. Thank you.
Now it's our side to challenge our French colleagues with 2 or 3 questions, not more than 3 questions. Short questions. Please introduce yourself firstly. So, yeah.
I'm Major General Paul Hormuz, and sorry for bothering you again. But since there is a chance to put a question, I believe that the dialogue on the nuclear dimension is important. And I know, listening to one podcast with Mrs. Eloise Fayet the other week, I was really impressed by all the conversation which take place in France and mostly in Western Europe. I believe that it's important to understand exactly also the nuclear dimension of the threat we have in Europe and trying to find out of the box also for solutions. So I would like your comments.
Some other questions? Yeah, Professor Vaccarello. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Marius Vaccarello. I'm a professor in National School of Political and Administrative Studies, Bucharest. My question is about economic model. We are now in the decade of changing of the economic model. Artificial intelligence, big public debts in many countries, and we have also some wars. Can we connect all these factors and to consider that in 10 years maybe we will have a new kind of economic model, especially in Europe? Thank you.
Professor Vaccarello, maybe you should a little bit rephrase. Our colleagues from France didn't get the whole your idea. Excuse me for this inconvenience.
Donc, le modèle économique, le conflit, non? La guerre, la dette publique qui est très grande, et l'intelligence artificielle. Cela ont créé un nouveau modèle économique dans les 10 ou peut-être 20 années.
Thank you very much. So, we are trying to have one more question, if there is. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Robin Bucur Portase. I'm a young European ambassador and one of the 12 future leader fellows from the fellowship of the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center. I have a question for Speaker Dr. Angela Gramado. What would be some solutions to easing the forced Romanization fears in Moldova that you spoke about?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. We'll try also to answer this question, but we'll try to have one more question from our colleagues from Paris.
Thanks a lot. We will just answer the question.
Yes, we have just one, the last one. Yeah, thanks, Dr. Romain. We have one more question, and that's the final one.
Hello, my name is Cristian Kiskop. I'm a project coordinator for the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Bucharest. I'm very happy to see our colleagues in Paris. We had this year a very interesting event in Bucharest on the Black Sea, and I'm happy to see some familiar faces over there. So hello again from my side. My question is for Monsieur Aroche, because you raised the issue of trust, and you put it very interestingly, not at the technical level or technological level, but at the political level. And my question to you would be, whether do you see the current political cooperation between Romania and France at a satisfactory level, or could it be better? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before moving to the Paris, Angela, please, short answer to our question.
I think I have the shortest suggestion in order to debunk all the disinformation and propaganda, but also to fight against this fear that are spread in the Moldovan society. It's the education. And the education includes also professionalism, includes also media literacy, includes to read all the information and details, and to be careful with what the politicians are suggesting to us.
Thanks, very comprehensive, but very exactly to the point. Back to Paris, Dr. Romain, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And so Pierre now has 2 minutes to answer 3 very easy questions.
Thank you very much for these great questions. Very quickly on the nuclear question, I think it is important. In particular, I suggested in the past that instead of waiting other European partners to explicitly demand that France basically strengthen its commitment vis-à-vis European security, France perhaps should be more explicit about its offer, because I think that the problem we have at the moment is that it can be seen as a dangerous move by our partners to basically say, I have doubts about the existing structure and I would be happy to have a nuclear discussion with France. So basically, I think there is a debate that is ongoing. Personally, I don't think that this is the end of the story, and I think it would be good. Personally, I would welcome a clearer a change in the French doctrine, making more explicit that the defense of Europe is a part of our deterrence objectives. About the economic aspect, we already talked about the institutional adaptation that are necessary to make the union a truly geopolitical union, and I think indeed that you need also a geopolitical budget to be a genuine and incredible geopolitical actor. It has many implications. We heard about the Draghi report earlier in September. And I think this is a general reflection that we have to have in terms of what are the financial means that we have at our disposal to defend Europe. And finally, about the bilateral relationship between France and Romania, I would say more generally France and Eastern Europe and Eastern flank countries, I would say this is an ongoing process. I think there are still issues and trust could be strengthened. There are sometimes prejudice or fears on both sides, and that's why precisely Romain and I believe that it's so important that to talk about this and to make new initiatives and recommendations in this regard, because we think that is a very important work that has to be pushed forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre, for this very concise but direct answer and clear answers. So much things to do and to cooperate with between Romania and France, and this is why also we do this kind of event. So before to give the floor to Romania for final conclusions, just me very briefly say thank you to the Romanian Embassy, to our partners EARC, and for the organization of this forum. And before that, I have the great honor and the privilege to welcome Her Excellency for final remarks, Muriel Domenac, who is the former permanent representative of France to NATO. And this is a great pleasure for us to have her here and to hear final words and what we can call concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
Merci Romain. Concluding remarks and hopefully perspectives. A great honor for me to be speaking in these premises. Congratulations, warm congratulations. I want to praise all of those that contribute to further strategic intimacy, davantage d'intimité stratégique between France and Romania. I think our two countries probably tended to take each other for granted for lots of historical reasons. I myself was a strong advocate of France's interest strategically in the eastern flank during my tenure as France's ambassador to NATO. I have to say, having served at NATO before 20 years ago, it came to me as a surprise that while there was always this big taboo about, having a caucus within NATO, especially a European caucus, and Europeans would be afraid that, the Americans will never allow that. I actually realized that there was a caucus. The Bucharest 9 caucus is the caucus that works as a caucus at NATO. So conclusions for B9 summits are negotiated by NATO delegations from B9 countries, and rightfully so. After I came, I decided to actually speak to the B9 and have outreach and have our French perspective better understood and better understand their perspective. And it was always my conviction that if France wants to be a leader in European security, then France has to develop a better understanding of those allies that are the most exposed security wise. Also, from a personal perspective, being a mother of three, my partner and I wanted our kids to have a better understanding of what it is to have the Russians in your back, and we traveled the last 5 summers to the Black Sea, actually, Georgia and Romania, the Baltic states, Macedonia, and Poland this summer. With this, I want to maybe further develop on how France turned to grow interest in the eastern flank, maybe explain how it has developed and where we are now, and maybe perspectives in the face of a growing Russian threat. How that emerged, I'll be very brief. I guess both sides had to overcome our respective denialism, nos dénis respectifs. From the French perspective, listening more to what it is that our Eastern partners are seeing and we're not seeing in terms of the Russian threat, but also from the part of our Central and European partners have a better understanding of what it is that France has been seeing, probably because France, being less dependent on the US security guarantee, is less fearful that if we open our eyes, it's going to disappear. So, in other words, the French point that we need to be doing more for ourselves and that the Americans have other points of interest in the world but also the Eastern European awareness that the Russian threat is serious. As the Russian threat developed and the Ukraine was being obviously threatened by Russia, it came out as obvious that the 800 kilometers for Romania, a border between Romania and Ukraine had to be protected. My Romanian colleague at the time, Ambassador Stoyan, always made the point at the North Atlantic Council that we had developed enhanced forward presence in the 3 Baltic states and Poland, and the missing piece was mainly Romania. That didn't fall in a deaf's ears, and n'est pas tombé dans l'oreille de sourd, as we say. But probably that was developed by Pierre Haroche this morning, earlier today. French military leaders having to reconsider our deployments in Africa got the point. And as of fall 2021, as Putin was increasing his intimidation and threat on Ukraine, already we were sending reconnaissance missions to Romania. I have to say, to be fair, that France's presence on the eastern flank had started already in 2004. I was France's defense counselor at the time. And I have to say, while France was not integrated militarily into NATO, it was the honor of my ambassador at the time, Benoit Daboville, to suggest to recommend to Paris that we should contribute to the air policing of the Baltic states. So already 20 years ago. Also, we had, as you know, taken a significant part in the UK-led enhanced forward presence for NATO in Estonia. Yet, as I said, I traveled to the Baltic states. That was summer 2021. It came to me as a surprise as I was visiting our military in Estonia that we would rather keep a very low profile in terms of strategic communication with our people on the ground. Probably that was not taken at the time as, something we should praise ourselves about. Probably we were too fearful that we should not provoke or whatever. This has changed totally, as you can follow from the strategic communication of our armies. How it developed, pretty simply, the Russian aggression on Ukraine came as a shock as we were preparing for enhanced deterrence and, if needed, defense. In the case of a Russian aggression, we were ready to deploy in Romania. We deployed in 4 days. That is well known to everyone. The mountain infantry, le 27e BCA, deployed already as of the 28th of February. Probably less known is the notion that we flew Rafale in the skies of Poland as of the morning of the Russian aggression on Ukraine. So to make sure that the Russians understand that they should not even try. We maintained our land presence in Estonia, while at the time we were supposed to withdraw it for rotation reasons. And also we deployed already at the time the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle in Eastern Mediterranean, flying over the Balkans. Later on, we deployed air defense in Romania and also the Black Sea. And in case the point wasn't made, I have to make it. France is the only country that significantly flies manned flights over the Black Sea for obvious reasons. Now, it is well known that we are developing a brigade size deployment exercise nation spring next spring, 2025. I won't comment on your proposal, although I'm sure duly noted. Yet, while Russia is doing everything hybrid, nuclear rhetorics, also conventional intimidation, and we know we're going ahead of a massive American pivot to the Asia Pacific region. We have to be doing more together. I would see four levels of four categories, perspectives in terms of what more we could be doing. Strategic mobility, Black Sea, nuclear, and disinformation. Disinformation that was discussed at length. I won't go back to that, but I think it's key, and it's where we should activate the EU in cooperation with NATO. And I trust that Rutte, the new NATO SecGen, has the potential to be the first NATO SG to efficiently work with the EU. The Weimar Triangle developed interesting perspectives in this respect. Strategic mobility, there again, cooperation with the EU will be key. I have very detailed remembrances of our deployment to Chinku and how we ended up not being able to deploy by road. We had to deploy Leclerc tanks by rail. We ended up arriving in the railway station Voilà. Near Chinku, that stayed as a reminiscence of what it is that's not possible in terms of military mobility. I doubt that in the case of a conflict, we will have the luxury of taking the train. There will be train, but in the first instance, we'll have to drive. We need to be able to communicate classified information from NATO to the EU. As you know, this is not the case for the moment because one ally has been constantly blocking the communication of classified information, not only blocking the communication of classified information, but also insisting that information should be super classified. So in case unclassified information could be passed to the EU. So we need to fix that strategic mobility so we can act together. Black Sea, we have to be doing more. Trilateral cooperation, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey is promising. We need to have NATO in this. There again, a lot of work on our Turkish allies that have been very, very reluctant to let NATO step in, while I should remind everyone that the Black Sea is Secure's area of responsibility. And last, nuclear. We have to be able to do more in terms of the socialization of nuclear subjects between France and Romania. I won't go into theological issues. I would rather go practical after Eloise Fayet's recommendations. Having been the first French ambassador to brief the North Atlantic Council on our poker exercise, I think there is a value in us briefing our Romanian friends on poker. Briefings, possibly having our Romanian allies as observers. I think those are promising avenues, and let me stop there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I don't have to conclude on anything. You did so, and you did it well. So just final thank you to everyone that has been involved, and back to Bucharest.
Thank you very much. Also, we are very happy that you are at the end to have our conclusion. I invite Mr. Alexandru Andronic to draw our conclusion. Thank you very much also to our French colleagues.
Thank you, everyone. I will be very brief because the panel was extended in terms of time, mostly for technical reasons. Glad we fixed that. I wish to thank all of our distinguished speakers, both in Bucharest and in Paris. And I wish to thank the two moderators, Mr. Roman Lechiniu, who moderated amazingly in Paris and helped us organize there. I wish to thank very much Mr. Flavius Cabamaria, who was also kind enough as to moderate here in Bucharest. Amazing. And I wish to thank the Romanian Embassy in France and Her Excellency Mrs. Ambassador Ioana Bivolaru for all the help offered by the embassy in terms of the organizational side of things, including the room and everything. And thank you to everyone who attended and who participated. It was good to see you, and I hope to see you again at our events. Thank you very much.